Hello, I'm the Angry Spork, taking issue with the adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix. Our mutant newlyweds have spent 5 years in a future ruled by Apocalypse, raising Nathan as an adoptee under assumed names. Though nearly found out as they reach the city of Crestcoast, they're saved by a strange cyborg that shares their mission in saving the world. Also, Apocalypse's heir is Nate's clone, a young Strife, who really likes killing people, which really shouldn't be all that surprising. Issue 3's cover has Jean holding Nathan, seeming to fly them away from an explosion. This is why you have to keep an eye on your kids when you go to the department store. Much like Professor X did for her, Jean, aka Red Dayspring, is trying to teach Nathan to use his powers to mask his cybernetic exterior. Much as he'd prefer his adoptive mom to do it, she can't be around him all the time, and as difficult and painful as it is, he needs to learn to utilize his own psionic talents. He manages to make his largely mechanical-looking arm appear as flesh, which he figures is so he doesn't draw unwanted attention to her and Slim, aka Cyclops, while they try to avoid Apocalypse and his goon Chevere. "I'm tired of running and hiding for no reason, Red." Avoiding getting incinerated or vivisected count as reasons, kiddo. "I'm sick of pretending to be something I'm not. I want to be an insurance adjuster when I grow up." She tells him that whatever he's called, mutant or human, doesn't change what he is inside. When he asks just what that is, she has difficulty explaining that he grows up to be Cable, cyborg mercenary dedicated to destroying Apocalypse, and that she and Slim are his real parents. Well, Madeline Pryor being his biological mother, but why get bogged down in semantics now? It's not like she can actually tell him anything. The kid shows some of that proactive bravado of his future self, wanting to go after En-Sabah instead of hiding from him, but laments having to pretend for now that he's more and less than human, a freak. Jean can tell the boy's exhausted, so holds him close, saying that no matter what he looks like, whatever choices he has to make, how alone he feels, he's not a freak. There are people who love and believe in him, always. It's a genuinely heartwarming moment as Jean reflects on spending 8 years in this future wasteland, but through all their troubles, having to hide, run, deceive, she wouldn't trade a single moment. "Well, maybe with the exception of that time we had to hide out in Florida." Miles away, Strife is amusing himself by torturing a human to death. We don't see how, as it happens off-panel. While Apocalypse is proud of his heir, Chevere internally disapproves that the superior mutant race, the goal his master envisioned, has become the cruel slaughter of innocents for cheap giggles, with little else to offer the world. When Strife leaves for the night, the prelate reiterates his concerns over the acceleration of the young one's mutant powers, robbing him of his childhood. This gets him thrown across the room by Pocky, who exposits he couldn't care less about the kid's childhood, since the entire reason he infected him with the techno-organic virus was to see if he would survive it and prove a worthy vessel. He was rather ticked off when he found out the kid had been flung into the future, but managed to eventually destroy the Ascani to get him back, retaking his ultimate victory, and his underling should concern himself with stopping the rebels that still stand against him. As the mention of the virus reminds Chevere of the diseased child he bargained with in issue 1, we jump to Slim and Prior Turin discussing a raid they're undertaking soon. Slim thinking they need a clearer idea of what they hope to accomplish. Turin figures this has to do with some recent losses and spilled blood they've suffered, and muses if someone else should take up the fight. "Do you have Batman's number?" Jean steals her man away for a moment to psychically discuss Nathan. His condition is in remission, but he's under a great deal of emotional stress, and Scott figures he needs to be more of a dad. He kicks himself for not being more sensitive and attentive, especially since he spent so much of his youth in an orphanage. But Jean, switching to verbal whispers for some reason, says parenting is still tricky for them even after 8 years, and he can talk with Nate in the morning. Turin notes how they're in perpetual clutch, given that they're not legally allowed to bond. It's like the Jedi. They can sleep together, but no sharing interests or having deep emotional concern for one another's welfare. It's one of Apocalypse's weirder laws, if I'm being honest. Then Cyclops throws a bit of a wrench into the story's chronology. He tells the Prior their dedication to stopping their overlord can't be questioned after 5 years, but since it's been stated twice they've been here for 8, and the second issue had a 5-year time skip, that means they've only known and worked with Turin for about 3 years. So yeah, a little bit confusing, not sure how that's supposed to work. Anyway, another rebel, Scarrett, wants to know why these tainted humans are interested in the matters of the lower caste, and Red says they'll explain their motivations after the mission. And unbeknownst to anyone, even the one with psychic abilities, Nate is watching, finding out his parents are part of the rebellion.
They told me they were going to poetry slams after I went to bed. Is everything I know a lie?
Within the hour after traversing forgotten tunnels, the group has made it to a sub-basement, also considered forgotten. It feels a little too easy for Red's liking, but Turin figures that's just Apocalypse's trademark arrogance.
That's impossible!
With the help from a synth-con called Gyak. Okay, who put a Terminator in the microwave again? They access the complex's laboratory systems and discover that they've been working on an airborne virus that will end the human race, as indicated by a hollow simulation of a disintegrating strand of human DNA. Philosh of the High Ground! Nate has followed the rebels, and despite being behind his guardians, can somehow see they look like they've seen a ghost. Jean and Scott recognize the data from Charles Xavier's files. It's Strife's legacy virus, a pathogen that got released in their own time that was largely affecting mutants, and even killed Colossus' sister, Ilyana Rasputin. Though, of course, she got better, so no biggie, right? In its current form, the virus cannot differentiate between human and mutant DNA, and if it were released now, it would just wipe out all life in general. That's when they're ambushed by Javert, destroying Gyak, and claiming the flat scans got overconfident in recent months with their victories. Victories such as... I have no idea, the book never says. Nathan wants to help, but someone keeps him still, a voice telling him to stay put.
Wait a minute. You're not that voice that tells me to set things on fire.
Red saves Scarrett from one of Javert's goons, but doesn't go for the kill, clarifying to her disappointed ally that when they stop showing compassion to their enemy, they become the enemy. 5 minutes on Twitter would probably make Jean rethink this position. She thinks to herself how Scarrett might react if he knew she and her husband were mutants, which will totally not come up in the next page at all, so don't you expect it or anything. Strife shows up, countering Javert's previous orders to take the rebels alive and do away with a lot of them, and then bring their remains to Apocalypse. This is how you can tell someone procrastinated on finding a Father's Day gift. Turin starts blasting some debris to block off their attackers, and Slim helps, showing off his optic blasts to the surviving rebels. Oh, look, that thing Jean mentioned was brought up a page later. Who'da thunk it? As they retreat, and Red and Scarrett plant explosives, One Eye, 2 eyes, I guess, clarifies he kept this secret from the others for their protection, and that not all mutants share Apocalypse's racism. While waiting on weapons to cut through the obstruction, Javert chides Strife for his orders to randomly kill their enemies, as it caused most of them to retreat before they could be captured. The boy gives an empty apology before deciding to amuse himself by killing one of the goons because he's wounded, so why not? Nepo babies, am I right, folks? Nearby, Nate is at a console, not knowing anything about computers, but guided by the voice to operate it. As Jean and Scott double back to take on Javert's crew, buying their allies time, Nate is surprised by Strife, and the two notice the striking similarities they share, give or take some scarring and cybernetic abnormalities. The heir to Apocalypse is enraged at not being as unique as he thought, so attacks Nate, strangely almost feeling the pain that he's inflicting. Uh-oh, it might be that pesky empathy thing. Wouldn't want Pappy hearing about that, or you might lose your inheritance. The voice, which Strife can hear as well, instructs Nate to let his power flow through him unrestrained, and it results in a burst of energy that leaves Strife unconscious. Then gives us a bit of Kid Cable body horror. You know, if you keep making that face, it'll get stuck that way. The voice tells the little brother not to fear what he is, that he has more power than he or those closest to him might suspect, and over time, as his abilities develop, he'll have no peer in all the universe, but the voice will be with him until that day arrives. Well, there'll be this other younger version of you from a different timeline, also ruled by Apocalypse, but that's an event story for a different time. Javert orders the complex destroyed, willing to take responsibility for what happens to the virus research. Strife is brought to him, and the prelate seems curious if he's dead, to which the minion carrying him says, "Alas, no," indicating that they might have preferred the kid snuffed out instead of just unconscious and wounded. While Javert takes him to the Citadel, he leaves the extermination of the rebels to his troops. Said rebels are hightailing it now that their explosives are set, and Scott and Jean notice how the kid in the enemy camp must be their son's clone. Fortunately, the original Nate makes himself known so he can hitch a ride with them. Also, I'm noticing Jean telekinetically flying with a fiery aura around her, which gives some heavy Phoenix Force vibes, which is weird since in issue 1 they said the Phoenix took off decades beforehand. Whatever. The complex is destroyed with a much bigger kaboom than could have been managed by the bomb scare it set, which Nate says is probably because he set the computers in the entire structure to self-destruct. He programmed them to go online and make drunken conspiracy-laced rants about imaginary shadow societies. Because humans are forbidden from high-end tech, and the kid has never touched a computer, this is kind of a surprise. So he mentions that he had help from a lady whose voice he sometimes hears in his head, named Rachel. Later, as Crestcoast celebrates the knight's victory, Scott goes to a secret place where Rachel is hooked up to life support machines. He realizes that her irreversible coma hadn't left her shut off so completely from the world, and thanks her, not just for helping Nathan, but for bringing the Summers family together. He then apologizes for not treating her like a daughter when he had the chance, that he's proud to be her dad, and that he loves her. "But I'm still not buying you that pony." Meanwhile, across the city, we have a splash page of Javert alone, taking stock of recent events, and unable to ignore what's before him. He believed his whole life Apocalypse's claim that mutants' true superiority and their position in the world came from compassion for and understanding of all life forms. Which Apocalypse have you been watching all this time, Bunky? However, Strife's actions make it clear that his master has a very different definition of strength. The boy's soul is being sacrificed so that he can be an empty vessel for a dark and vile master.
Well, duh.
The issue ends with Javert accepting that he can't do anything to save the lad that Strife may have become, but it may not be too late to save the millions of people of all races who might die if Strife succeeds in becoming the Chaos Bringer. I just have to convince him not to start a podcast. Okay, so it is kind of weird that this dude that looks down on humans and slaughtered a bunch of them like the Scani is talking about mutants having a better understanding of compassion for all life. But you know what they say about history being written by the victors, and Apocalypse here is, well, one of those. Given the slanted propaganda Javert was dealing out in issue 2, it's not impossible that Pocky just created narratives over the generations to convince more people to his side. It's what dictators, fascists, heretics, stochastic terrorists do. Repeat lies, convince people that the wrong thing is right and the right thing is wrong. And please, before anyone tries posting in the comments about which side of what ideology in modern-day real life exemplifies what I just said, please rethink where you get your information from and read outside your echo chamber. A little critical thinking goes a long way. Thing is, this change of heart almost seems out of left field. Not entirely, since he's shown concern for Strife's growth as a person and lecturing him not to kill indiscriminately. But it just seems like taking out humans and uprisings should be more old hat for Javert, and there didn't seem to be a lot to show why he's less comfortable with it now. Maybe if we saw his reaction to his soldier being killed on Strife's whim, that could have helped. This was still a good issue, with a lot of heartwarming moments between the Summers family, and I guess Rachel was that cargo mentioned last issue, so that's one question answered. Tune in next week as we conclude this series, see how far Javert will go to defy his lifelong overlord, and how Scott and Jean leave things when they finally catch their psychic flight back to their own time. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.